I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a series of videos about veneer repairs. I've always enjoyed doing veneer repairs, but a lot of people are hesitant to try. I see videos online where people fill in spaces of missing veneer with putty, sand the dickens out of them and paint them. If that's the look you're going for, more power to you. But there are other options. Let's see if we can't pull back the curtain on veneer repairs. This is a table that I'm in the process of refinishing. I stripped the table. There were some strange looking areas on the table, and when I stripped it, I discovered that those strange areas were rather large places where veneer was missing and had been filled with putty. I'm not going to redo the putty. Instead, I'm going to try to patch in a piece of veneer. Now, this table has a very, very unusual figure to it. I don't even know if it has any sort of a name. I don't have any veneer that matches this figure exactly, but I do have some nice pieces of crotch mahogany that I think I can find pieces that will pretty closely match what I see here. Okay, so I'm going to do this patch. The first thing I'm going to do is put some thinner on here, look at the figure, and then look at some figured veneer I have and determine where I'm going to cut my patch. I'm going through all my pieces of crotch veneer, and I think I found a place that actually looks pretty good. This has got this wild little figure going on here, and in this piece of veneer I found a similar thing going on right in here. So if I can cut my patch, if I can orient this correctly, and I can cut my patch out of here, that could work. I think that if I do that right about there, that may be my best shot. So I'm going to put a piece of tape straight across this area that I want to use. Number one, I want to remember this area, and I'm going to try to keep this veneer that's already cracked. This will help me cut it. Now sometimes when I'm doing a patch, I'll try to follow these contours, but in this particular case these are too ragged, and this is somewhat triangular shape, so I'm going to square off these ragged edges. Now I'm going to clamp down my straight edge along my pencil line there. That'll help me to cut a really straight line. So this is the area here where I want my patch. I want it to be oriented like that. So I want to glue this piece of paper to the back of my veneer. I can't see my line, so what I think I want to do is take my straight edge, draw the lines hard so that they'll imprint through the back. Yeah, I can faintly see them now, enough to be able to redraw them. Okay, now I'm gonna use adhesive, glue this to the back of the veneer. This is the area that I want. I want to position it right about where I want it. Okay, that's going to fit pretty well. My veneer's pretty thick here. I'm going to take away some of this wood. Now I'll use a little paint thinner to get this piece of paper off the back of my patch. Okay, I think I'm ready to glue this down. Position it. Alright, the glue's dried overnight. Let's take the clamps off and see what we've got. Alright, I'm going to get a little paint thinner to loosen this tape up. I don't want to pull up any veneer or even just wood grain or anything. Now I'll use a gray pad to scrub this adhesive off of here. So there's my patch. I've got some nice figure in it that sort of matches this other figure. My patch looks dark. I'm going to let this paint thinner dry and sand this area, and then, and of course, trim the edge of my patch, and then we'll see what it looks like. When I first finished the patch on this table and sanded it, I was disappointed in the color. It was a little dark, but I realized I had to stain the rest of the table, so I taped off my patch, stained around it, and ultimately it came out really well, and I'm happy with it. I think it looks pretty good. In this video, I gotta admit the buckled veneer looks hopeless. You'll see I'm injecting hide glue in there, and that's you'll see that I was using hide glue that I mixed up myself, either from granular pieces or pearl hide glue. And that was before I discovered the old brown glue, which is a ready mixed hide glue. There's nothing better than taking that clamp off in the morning and see that veneer laying down flat like you hoped it would. This is an antique cabinet to which I'm doing a lot of veneer repairs. But there's one area here I want to show in this video. This is an area where the core has shrunk and the veneer has buckled. This is a very common thing we see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up this buckled veneer with a heat gun, work hide glue under it everywhere I can, and then just clamp it down. And then we'll see how well it worked when I take the clamp off. The veneer, as it heats up, is just becoming very, very flexible. I'll keep heating it until I feel it's as flexible as I can get it. I think I've got this about as hot as I dare, and it definitely is more pliable. I'd like to point out I'm using hide glue here. I think it'll be really compatible with the hide glue that's under here, but you could actually use any kind of carpenter's glue. Okay, I'm just warming this up a little bit before I put the caul on. This is a board I use a lot for veneering. It's got a camber to it, so that when I put the clamps on each end and apply pressure, it'll apply pressure all the way across this board. Alright, tomorrow we'll see how well it went down. The beauty of it is that if part of it didn't go down the way I want it to, or anything else that's wrong, I can heat it up and redo it. Hopefully I won't need to. Okay, let's see what we got. Wow, all that buckling went down. It's flat. Now I got to get this all this excess glue off of here to see what I've got. I'll get a damp rag and a scrubby pad and clean that off and then have a better look. Okay, all that glue came off pretty easily. And now with the glue off, I can see that there are some areas where some of the veneer is sticking up, where maybe it overlapped a little bit. But I'll let this dry. I've got more veneer to glue down over here. And then I'll sand this and see how it sands out. I think it'll sand flat. Luckily, this veneer's got some thickness to it. Okay, this is sanding up nice and flat. I got a little sanding to do. I've got to use some wood putty in the cracks and defects and sand everything flat. But I can tell that when I get the first coat of finish on here, it's going to look pretty good. I really like this Italian table in this video. The top is beautiful. And in this video, a couple things. You notice how thick the veneer is, and that has advantages and disadvantages. You also notice I'm doing a lot of percussing, looking for loose veneer. Also notice that I make no attempt to flatten the top after working on it. This is a nice console table or side table, probably Italian. Could be late 18th, maybe early 19th century. It's got a few problems, mostly loose veneer. It has a broken leg I've got to repair. But this video will focus on the top. I'm going to glue down the loose veneer on the top. There's at least 2 places where veneer is missing. And then I'll do a gentle restoration of the top. Alright, before I replace the missing pieces, I'm going to look for and glue down all the loose pieces I can find. We do that by tapping. You can hear the loose veneer. This table's difficult because this inlay is very thick. It's like 1/8 of an inch thick. The thing that's weird about this table is that a lot of this veneer, this banding here, doesn't even touch the core of the table. There's wood underneath of it. So I'm going to glue this piece back, but at the same time I'm going to glue in, there's a piece of missing stringing here, so I'm going to put that in. Alright, I've got a big missing piece here of the walnut banding and some inlay. I'm going to square this off where it's broken and then measure and cut my pieces. And I'm going to cut 2 pieces. In here, this is 2 levels, so I'm going to cut a piece to fit in the lower level and then a piece that'll be on top. Cutting my pieces to fit into this space, I had to cut a little piece to fill this space in the bottom. I've cut a piece then for the upper part, but I can see I've got to thin that out a little bit. I've got to cut 2 pieces of my stringing inlay to fit in there because of the thickness. I need to thin down this piece, my new piece here, before I glue it down. I'm ready to glue it down. I'm going to clamp a board to the underside of the table to give me something to clamp to when I clamp that patch down. Okay, I think I've got every piece of loose veneer glued down. The next step I'm going to do is to clean this just with some water and a rag, maybe a 3M pad, to get all this glue off the surface. It's got some sharp edges and stuff. The top's very uneven, and I don't want to change that. I'm not going to change the way it looks too much, but I want to get some finish down on it. I got to get some kind of protective coating on it. So I'm going to sand it with 220 just by hand, make it feel so that it feels nice and smooth. Alright, I'm done sanding with 220. I'm glad I sanded it. A lot of stuff came off the top. It still has a lot of the original color. It's a little bit brighter, and I think it's going to look great. So I'm going to put a coat of tung oil on it now as a sealer. Okay, the first sealer coat has dried overnight. Now I'm going to sand with some 320, just lightly. Okay, now I've sanded that first coat with 320. I'm going to brush on a second coat of tung oil. Alright, I've let this coat dry for 2 days. And that looks great. Now I'm going to rub it down with 4/0 steel wool. Okay, I've rubbed this down with steel wool. It looks great, but I still, for a final step, I'm going to wax it. So I keep patting this with my wax rag to make sure that I've got it nice and even and not too much wax. And then really I don't let it dry very long. I take a clean rag and just buff it off. Alright, there you go. This is a nice little Italian side table. If you remember, I glued down a lot of veneer that was loose on the top. I replaced a couple of pieces, and then I gave it a gentle refinishing just using tung oil and wax. Looks pretty good. This big table is not an antique, but I wanted to show how you replace veneer along the edges. If you don't have those fancy clamps that I was using, masking tape can work really well. And here again, I'm sitting down, a very rare occurrence. This is a really nice tabletop, satinwood veneer. It's not just a regular sunburst pattern. This highly figured veneer you can see is in like a compass pattern with the same veneer but slightly different figure, not as bold, filling in these parts here. And the problem with this table is the edge. The edge is veneered also, and there's a lot of veneer chipped away, some loose veneer. It also is not finished to the same level as the top. So I've got to repair all this veneer. I'll get someone to help me put this on the bench, and then get the veneer and start preparing it. This is really nice maple. It's even got a little bit of curl to it, a little bit of figure. And I'm not sure what the wood is on this edge exactly, but it looks plain like maple. It's kind of grainy. But I noticed that this veneer too has, for maple, is kind of grainy. I think it's gonna work fine. So the first thing I want to do is set up and cut some strips of this veneer the same width as the edge of the table. So when working with veneer like this, especially when you're cutting it across grain, the pieces you cut become very weak, so you want to back them up with some tape. And the edge of the table measures exactly 1 inch, and I have some 1-inch tape here, so that makes it pretty convenient. I'll be able to actually mark off the strips with the tape. I hope you can see, I think you could in the close-up, the top veneer goes over the top edge of the banding veneer on the edge. In other words, they veneered this edge first, then this veneer went over. So I'm trying to leave that edge of veneer right here that's sticking out over my patch, and I'll try to get my patch up under that little ledge right there. So I'm getting ready to glue down the veneer to the edge. I'm going to use these clamps, 3-way clamps, designed for doing this kind of a job. I'm going to put down a piece of tape here. I've got to protect the surface of the tabletop. A piece of tape, folded sandpaper, a piece of wood. I've already put the wooden sandpaper underneath. Then I'll position my veneer in place. I'll use hide glue, position it in place, and then put my clamps on. I've got a thin piece of 16th inch aluminum and a piece of bending plywood to use as a caul. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. Let's see what we got. All right, that looks good. So now I'm just going to start working my way right around the table. I've got some, that was probably the largest patch. I have others. Most of them are pretty small. So on some of these smaller pieces, I'm going to use a new kind of clamp that I got called a bandy clamp. I've run out of edge clamps, but the clamping time on the hide glue is pretty short, so I'll just take my first clamp off. It's been on for a couple hours. I think this glue, as long as it clamps on for about an hour, that's probably okay. Although I'll let it dry overnight before I work on it. But the clamping time is relatively short. Alright, that's 20 veneer patches, and so now I've got to sand them. So the next step is to trim the patches, where they overhang. I'll do that with the chisel, and then I'll sand. I'm going to sand with 100 grit, and that initial sanding I'll sand with the grain, and of course the grain runs vertically. Okay, once I'm done with 100, there's a lot of little spaces and gaps, like along here, even one there, that I'm going to fill with wood putty. Okay, I've finished sanding all my repairs with 100 grit in the direction of the grain. So now I'm going to sand with 150, and now also I'm going to sand against the grain. I'm going to sand this way. And as long as I do that just with 150 and then really well with 220, it'll be fine. Scratch marks won't show. It gets a very light stain. It'll work fine. There's a lot of areas here where not where my repairs were, where the original veneer meets the top, and there's a little gap there, and I'm going to try to, I'm trying to, as I go along, fill those with a little Fama wood. Okay, I've done the whole edge, all my repairs with 150. Now I'll do it all again with 220, and I'm sanding with 220 until I can see my scratch marks, like from the 150, and I can see them disappearing with the 220. Okay, I finished sanding with 220, and yesterday I glued up a piece of the same veneer that I used for the edge, and I've sanded it to 220, and I'm going to try some stains out on it. The first stain I'm going to try is some light golden oak. The color's good. It's a little light, but I like light. I'd rather have light than too dark. I think I may try this on the table itself. And if it's light, that's okay. I'll seal it with shellac and then add a little more color to it. Okay, I've let the stain dry for a couple minutes, and now I'll wipe it off. I'll kind of pat it off. Remember, the stain was light, so I don't want to wipe it off too much. Now this is fast drying stain. I'll set the timer and let it dry for an hour. So the stain is dried, and so now I'll apply a coat of shellac. And first I'll put a coat on the sample. Well, that looks pretty good. I was hoping to have a little bit more of a yellowing effect. Doesn't seem to have much effect, but I'll put my first coat of shellac on, and then I'll see what I can do about the color. It's not changing the color too much, the shellac is not, but my new wood is lighter than the old wood, and that's what's important. I'll go back after the shellac dries and then figure out exactly what I'm going to do to blend it in. The initial coat of shellac has dried, so now I've got to add a little color. You can see my new patch it's a good color, but the wood surrounding it is a little bit darker, a little bit grainy, and that's good. So I'm going to add, I'm going to try first to add a little bit of raw umber color to some shellac and apply that just to the patches. First, I'm going to go over this with a 500 paper, just lightly. Just it may be a little too dark. I'm not sure. I can always add some more shellac, but I'm going to try it anyway. I can always, wipe it off. Yeah, it is a little dark, but by then wiping it slightly, it gives me a little bit of that grainy effect, and blends in pretty well. In fact, when I stood back a little bit, I had a hard time even spotting where this was. So I think I'm just going to keep going like this and wipe it off as needed. Actually, I seem to have just the right amount on the brush now, and it goes on pretty well without even the need to wipe. As I work my way around the whole perimeter here, there's lots of areas, even where I didn't work, the old veneer, where there's color variations. There's a lot of color variation in this edge, and so I'm able to even go and touch up some of these light spots too, and take the curse off them a little bit. A lot of different areas. The touch-ups look good. It's funny, when I'm up close like that, I can really see a lot of variation. When you stand back and look at it, it looks a lot better, thank goodness. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to take some light golden oak aerosol toner, and I'm actually going to go over this entire edge, and that will, I think that will like really pull it all together. Yeah, that was definitely a good move. In fact, some of these areas I may hit a second time. I'll let this dry a bit, and then I'll check it again and hit it wherever I think it might be necessary. But it's really looking good now. Okay, I've let the golden oak dry for about a half an hour. And now I'm going to spray it again, but with clear gloss lacquer. Okay, I'm about ready for the final step on the edge, but the first thing I'm going to do is clean the top. It's not bad, but I'm going to go over it. There was a little even gras doux on it when I picked it up, so I've got some cleaner I buy at the hardware store, and this is an industrial paper towel. You spray the cleaner directly onto the towel, not onto the top itself. Okay, I cleaned it. Now I'm going to go over the top. This is just an extra fine buffing compound that you use by hand, and I'm just going to go over the top quickly, make sure that the shine is completely back, especially on the edge here where I was working and might have a little bit of overspray. This will take it right off. Now for the final step on the edge of the table, I'm just going to French polish it. I'm going to use a product that's made for French polishing. there we go, this beautiful satinwood compass design top. There's really nothing wrong with the top itself. The edge had a lot of problems, and geez, I think it looks pretty good.